Hi guys, hello, how's it going today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing my next palette review. This is a palette roulette series is what I call it on my channel, but it's about palette reviews and it's not necessarily the newest, biggest, brightest new palette on the market. It is palettes that are in my collection that I want to get some use out of, that I haven't gotten any use out of at all or in a very, very long time, and I just want to make sure that I'm reviewing all the things for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. If that sounds like something you're interested in, please keep on watching. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm so happy to have you here today. So glad that you found me, and I am a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a district leader, and I get a lot of education in my position, and I like to bring that to you. In addition, I just kind of like to talk about makeup, and you people are my people. So I hope that you're interested. I hope that you find that this is the place that soothes your soul as much as it soothes my soul. And I hope that you'll want to subscribe before you go. With that said, let's jump in to the Natasha Denona Glam Palette. Hi. So today we are going to review the Natasha Denona Glam Palette, and this is a palette that wasn't on my radar at all. It wasn't a palette that I wanted. For those of you not new here, you know, I am a Natasha Denona stan. However, I also know when I can purchase something that I'm going to use and when I'm not. And I try and make really sound decisions. This was not a sound decision. This was a palette that did not interest me at all. It is basically a cool toned, like smoky eye palette. I am a lover of color, as you all heard at the beginning of this video. My intro always says it. High-end, colorful beauty. This is not a colorful palette. This is boring. So, why did you pick it up, Donna, you ask? I picked it up because one of my very good friends and somebody who used to work for me, her name is JC. She's on my channel often in the comments. She wanted it, and I bought it for her birthday. Not last year. Was it last year? JC, remind me in the comments. I can't remember because I neglected to write down when this launched, but I bought it for her birthday after it launched, and when it came in, I didn't have it sent to her. I had it sent to myself. I opened it up. I looked at it and I was like, ooh, that's real pretty. Sure, it's real pretty. This is the palette that we are addressing because I purchased it about 3 months later in the, I think it was in the Sephora Rouge event at that time. Maybe last year. I don't think it was last year. I purchased it anyways. So here it is in my collection, and I hadn't used it until this point. This is a $65 palette by Natasha Denona. It's one of her midi size palettes. So it does have like the hard encasing with the rubber on the back, and it does have the little holes so that you can poke out each one of these shadows and put them into a magnetic palette if you choose. The only thing that it has on it that indicates that it's a Natasha Denona palette on the back is this little sticker here that tells you that it's the Natasha Denona Glam palette. You open it up and it looks like this. It does have a really nice size mirror, and these are the shades in this palette. This is, again, a midi size, $65 for this palette. It does come in at 0.767 ounces of product, and that equates to 0.045 ounces per pan in each one of these shades. That's pretty typical of her midi size palettes. Her full size palettes are $129. Their shades are 0.08 ounces of product per shade. I have a ton of Natasha Denona in my collection. She is my favorite formula, and there we have it. That is why I purchased this. Apparently I'm a completionist when it comes to Natasha Denona, maybe. I don't know. This does come in at 4.5 stars on the Beautylish website, where it is sold with 17 reviews. It also comes in at 4.5 stars on the Sephora website with 451 reviews. And it comes in, of course, at 5 stars on the Natasha Denona website with 10 reviews. I don't know that I would rank this 5 stars. I don't know that I would rank this 4.5 stars. So we'll get there. This has 3 formulas in this palette. So you're going to get the metallic, the creamy matte, and the chroma crystal formulation. There is only 1 chroma crystal in this palette. The rest of them are creamy mattes or metallics. And with that said, there are 5 mattes. The rest are the metallics. There are 15 shades in here. They're all cool or neutral toned. However, there are an awful lot of them that lean really warm, even though that wasn't really an indicator on her website as to what you were going to see in this palette. I do feel like a lot of them lean very warm. And then there are, you know, tones of browns, grays. There's even like this pink shade here. That's really the only pink shade, and it's designed to create dramatic smoky eyes. It is a cruelty-free formula. So what I love about this palette is that the longevity of it does not stand alone as far as what you're going to see with the rest of the Natasha Denona shadows in her collection. They do have a really healthy wear time on your eyes. You're going to see probably an easy 10 to 12 hours of wear if you wear your shadows that long. I did take this palette with me on the road this week. It was a really nice travel palette. It stayed closed the whole time because even though there is no like magnet closing this and there's no clip that keeps it closed tight, it does stay closed. There's nothing that's going to dig in there and kind of jar it open. So it's a really great travel palette. What I would say, like as a caveat to that, is Natasha Denona palettes are pretty typically very, very fragile. So you're going to want to make sure it's laying flat in your makeup bag or standing up on edge with a lot of things leaned up against it so that it stays stable, because they are fragile. That is why when they come to you from, say, Sephora or whoever, they are wrapped up in many layers of cardboard to make sure that they don't break. I just sent a Natasha Denona palette away to the one that won my love palette, Miss Nona. It is coming, I promise. And I wrapped it in foam that I got from an Ipsy box because I didn't have the cardboard to wrap around it, and I just didn't want it to break, and I knew it would if it jostled around in the box. They are very fragile, so if you are going to travel with it, do wrap it or keep it very, very secure in wherever you put it. So anyways, beyond that, the wear time of them is fantastic. Like, I would put them on at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning when I was getting ready to start my day, and through travel and store visits, which typically are about 2.5 hours a piece, to more travel, to like just getting into my hotel room, sitting down, having a moment of peace, maybe eating dinner, to taking off my makeup, sometimes even 15 hours or more after I put it on my face. You still could see the eyeshadow on my face. There was no fading really, and I find that to be true of all of Natasha Denona shadows, which is why she is my favorite formula, because not only does she go on super pigmented and blend super easily for me, but she also stays for as long as I need her to stay on my eyes, no matter what I'm using as a primer. With that said, these shadows go on to your face like many other Natasha Denona shadows, with or without a primer, as easily and as pigmented as the opposite. So if you're using it on an unprimed eye or a primed eye, you're going to see kind of the same emphasis on the eyeshadows that you would get if they were on a primed eye versus an unprimed eye. You're also going to have the same blendability. You're also going to have the same wear time. There is very little fallout with this palette. I did notice it more with, of course, the shimmers than the mattes. That's going to be the standard across the board with any brand that you have, let alone Natasha's brand. And I would say also that the shimmers performed very, very well with or without being wet. The ones on my eyes today are not wet, and I have also put them on my eyes wet. I don't feel like the impact of the shininess or the awesomeness of the shimmer is reflective if you know, differently if you have it wet versus if you have it dry. I do feel like the shimmers perform better with your fingers than they do with a brush. And that is across the board the same along the lines of every shimmer in the Natasha Denona family. I don't use my fingers except for when I'm doing these reviews on any eyeshadow because I hate touching makeup. But I do know that they have a little bit more shininess to them if you put them on with your finger. Today, the golden shade on the center of my lid was placed with my finger just because it gives a little bit more of an impact. I love also that they're pigmented without having to work too hard at pigmentation, but they're also blendable pigmentation. So they might go onto your eye, wham, bam, there you go. But you are able to blend them out without much of a struggle. So that's what I loved. What I don't love about this palette is all very personal, to be honest. I kind of hate this color story. I knew that going in. Cool Tones has not ever been anything that I have ever loved. However, over the last several months, I have found many a Cool Tone palette that I have fallen in love with. This just isn't it. This was not it for me. And I don't know if it's because it's not as cool toned as I thought it was going to be. It's actually kind of dull and dreary, more so than it is cool or neutral or warm toned. I don't know what it is. I did not get along with this. I did not love it at all. I also think that the names on the palette, the shade names on the palette, are absolutely the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Like, why would you name 5 different shadows in this inner corner? One thing that I love about Natasha Denona shadows is the creativity behind the names of the shadows. The fact that I have to come on camera and go, there are 5 inner corner shades and this is what their names are, what they look like. It's stupid to me because I could tell you I'm going in with inner corner and that could be 15 different shades. Not really 15, 4. But that drives me bonkers. I wish they actually had names. That's trivial, right? First world problems. I get it. For a beginner, that would be amazing because they're going to know where each shade is perfectly placed. But I hesitate to believe that there is a beginner out there that's starting with a Natasha Denona palette. I didn't start with I don't know of anybody that started with a Natasha Denona palette. So there's that. I felt like every look that I got out of this palette looked the exact same. And I think that the biggest reason why is because there are 5 mattes in this palette. And they are all labeled for different things, right? One's a transition, one's a crease, one's a lash line, one's blend, and one's smoke. 5 mattes do not accommodate for many different eyeshadow looks that look also different. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense because there wasn't a whole lot of variety that you could get from this palette as far as the smokiness of your eye look goes. I think that this is probably the most different eye look that I have created in this palette, and I do think it looks very similar to almost all the other ones that I've created with this palette. I also feel like 2/3 of this palette being shimmers is a little bit overkill. I don't think that there needed to be 10 shimmer eyeshadows in this palette. Make it, you know, 60-40, but not, you know, 80-20. I think that that is ridiculous. Also, I just think that there was a lot of redundancy going on in the shimmers and you could have had more mattes and we would have been able to create other eye looks. In addition to that problem with the shimmers and mattes, because there were only 5 matte eyeshadows, I feel like this lacked a whole lot more depth than it needed to have to be a smoky eyeshadow palette. I think you've got some really beautiful eye looks that can be created from this palette, but I do think that there was a lot of depth that was missing from it. There's not a black in here at all. And when I think smoky eye look, I think at least a black in the outer corner. I mean, there is this deep one here, but that it's labeled lash line. And if you're brand new, you're not going to put that on your outer V, right? The outer V shades, well, I'm assuming that the outer V shade is this one called Smoke, and that's not even that deep. I just don't get it. I think that that's the biggest problem. I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it. And 5 mattes. I don't know. Tell me I'm not the only one that feels this way. I don't think that I am the only one that feels this way, but tell me I'm not the only one that feels this way. I think that it's really pretty and it suits a certain need, but I don't think that it's one that I needed in my collection, and I think I knew that before I even purchased it. And I think that pisses me off because I could have saved myself the money. I knew that this wasn't a palette that I was going to love when I purchased it. I think deep down, I knew that. So with that said, let's swatch them. And because all of these are labeled the same, I'm going to swatch them by how they're labeled in here. Okay, so the first one we have is this. This is the Crease shade, and it is called Crease. It is a kind of a cool taupey color. I don't think that this is a inclusive crease shade, if I'm honest. I think honestly it was really too dark for me, and it could be very light and ashy for deep skin tones, so I don't think that this was very inclusive. That being said, this is the Transition. It's a mushroom beige shade. Again, I don't feel like it's an inclusive shade. I feel like it could be very ashy. On many people, it was kind of ashy on me. Then we have this one, which is called Smoke, and it is a cool brown tone. It is a really pretty color. It is what is in my eye look today. I use this color quite often. This one is called Blend, and it is like a cool toned sienna shade. However, you can see it's actually quite warm. This one is the deepest one in the palette. It is considered the Lash Line shade. It's a cool tone deep brown shadow. It is what is in my outer V and on my lower lash line today. It is the shade that I used almost every single day as the outer V tone in my eyeshadow looks. I think that's why almost every single one of them looked exactly alike, because that is the deepest shadow in the palette. And when you tried to put this one on, that was also a very deep tone, supposedly, in the palette, it just wasn't deep enough. There wasn't a whole lot of depth to it. So that is the shadow that was used most often all week. There was the Lonely Brow Bone shadow, which is this one, and it's considered a champagne, but it's also very golden. It is in my brow bone today. It looks very good with this eyeshadow look, but I know that with some of the eyeshadow looks that I did, this was not a great brow bone shade. It popped more than the initial eye look did. So I had to find like a highlighter or something a little more cool toned or a little more transparent, I guess, to put into my brow bone. So those are the 6 shadows that have a single shadow in a shade name. So again, you have brow bone, and then you have Crease, Transition, Smoke, Blend, and Lash Line. Then we have Inner Corner, and Inner Corner has 2 shadows in it, and they are these 2 here, and one of them is a Peachy Champagne, which is, I mean, as you guys can see, very similar to that brow bone shade there, just slightly more pink. And then we have this one here, which is Abalone is what the description is, and that one is stunning. I love that shadow. That is actually what is in my Inner Corner today. I don't know that it doesn't show up this impactful, right, unless you are patting it on with your fingers. but it is a stunning shade. And you can't see it super well in the monitor here, but I think that you'll be able to see it really well in my photo of this eye look. It's a stunning shade. I loved that shade. So, so pretty. If I decluttered this palette, that shade would stay. All right, then we have Outer Lid, and with Outer Lid, there are 1, 2, 3 shadows, so I'm just gonna plop them on top here. These are the 3 Outer Lid shades. You can see they're a little bit grungy-ish, right? So we have this one here, which is also really pretty. This one is kind of like a warmer, like pinky gray toned brown. And then this one here, which is a darker, warmer, like pecan brown. And then we have this one here, which is a cool toned gray brown. So you have, for your outer lid area, you have a warm toned gray brown, a pecan brown, and a cool toned gray brown. All right, the last set of shadows, so 4, there are 4 in the last set, and those 4 are considered center eyelid shades. Forgive my fingers, they are all blue from my most recent hair dye extravaganza. You have this one, which is like a dusty rose shade. It is really pretty. I enjoyed using this shadow. That would be another one that would stay if I decluttered this palette. Then you have this one here, which is also another one that would stay if I decluttered it. This one is a really pretty warm toned silver. Oh my god, it was so beautiful in an eye look. Then you have this one here, which is a golden nude is what it is categorized as. I would say that is straight up gold. It is in my eye look today. It does perform on your eye a little less gold than this. Obviously it is in my eye look, but it still is gold. It's just not as like impactful as it is in a swatch. And then you have this one here, which is a straight up nude, and it is very light in tone. It's also a really pretty color. I loved it. I do have the light nude packed into the golden nude on my eye look today, packed into the kind of cool or warm toned brown, and then this matte, and this matte on my eye look, and then that in my brow bone. That's what I got going on. All right, so there are the shades of the Natasha Denona Glam palette. You can see it is very pretty. There is a lot of perks that this palette has to it. I do think that you could probably do a lot with this palette. What I would say is that I do not think that you can do a lot with just this palette. Now, I did use it in and of itself for the last week. I tried not to bring in any kind of single shadows to this because I wanted to see how this palette would function on its own. And I just don't think that it's got the variety that it needs to have in order for it to be, you know, your one and done eyeshadow palette. Do I think that she promoted this as a one and done eyeshadow palette? No, she definitely promoted this as a, you know, smoky eyeshadow palette, but I think you could get a really great smoky eye with 5 pans in this palette. I don't think that you need 15. And I don't think that you need 10 of those 15 to be shimmery, specifically when a lot of people do not put shimmers into their crease or into, you know, their transition or into, a lot of people don't. I have been known to do that. I'm not opposed to it, but a lot of people don't. And when there are only 5 mattes in the palette, it kind of forces you to put shimmers into your crease or into your transition, and that's going to turn a lot of people off to the palette. There's a fun fact for you though. On her website, she does, and I'll put a picture of it in here, she does have like a picture of 4 different ways that you could like rearrange this palette, have the shades have the same meaning, but 4 different ways you could rearrange this palette dependent on skin tone. And I think that was very smart of her. And that is something that you can do with all of Natasha Denona palettes because they have these things on the back where you can poke the shadows out. This is the easiest palette to do that with because there are 4 different shadows with the same name, right? But I think that I love that idea, but I also think that you could rearrange any one of Natasha Denona's palettes and come up with the color story or the like depiction of the shadows that you want to be in the palette. You just have to be sure to label the names on the back of the shadows because they don't have the names on the back of the shadows in the Natasha Denona palettes. But all of her midi size and all of her full size shadow palettes have that option. So it's nothing new. I do love that she shows you how to do it and shows you how to do it by color story for skin tone. Just fun fact, I guess. So with that said, I don't think that this will ever be the Natasha Denona palette that I would recommend. I do think that it's beautiful, but I think it's a beautiful companion piece, not necessarily a standalone piece. And I do think that when you're paying $65 for an eyeshadow palette, it also needs to stand alone on its own. So it would probably, in my ranking of Natasha Denona, if I was to do a new one of those, and I haven't used all my Natasha Denona palettes, so I'm not going to do a new one yet, but it would probably come in last. Now, currently, Circo Loco would be in last place. This would be behind that. So this would be in last place. Circo Loco just got bumped up. So there's that. I'm going to go pick a new palette. I'll be right back. Alrighty, I think I want some color put back in my life, so I am going to utilize the Glam Donut palette over the next week. This is a palette that isn't going to be a standalone palette, I will tell you that much right now. That color story is wicked bright and colorful, and while I love wicked bright and colorful, I also need a couple of like just neutral tones to play off of with this palette. So it does appear to have a good like mix of mattes and shimmers, but I will probably utilize some of my single shadows also to help me along the way with this palette. So this will be the palette that I go over next week. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, please don't forget to hit that bell so that you're notified when I upload, because I do this every single Monday and I would love to have you here along for this crazy ride of mine. Thank you guys. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks so much for being here today. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope that, as I said earlier, you found that my channel soothes your soul as much as it soothes mine. I hope that you'll want to subscribe before you go. Hit that notification bell so you're notified every single time I upload. And yeah, that's all I got for you. I do hope that you are all having an amazing 2021. I hope that you and yours have been safe and well and are healthy, and that we're getting along in this kind of crazy world as good as can be expected, right? I also hope that you're loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.